one day and told me that he had been working at a children's home and that he had been fired for reporting child sexual abuse. In my state and most states, you can let someone go from employment without many ramifications, but you can't fire someone for complying with state or federal law. It was not a smart case to take in terms of any financial outcome, but it was just offensive to me.
Kim has a great capacity and a great heart to want to step into things that are just hard, that most people don't have the courage to step into.
So I took the case, and that case morphed into representation of a bunch of the kids for the sexual abuse that they had experienced at this facility. It was a long case. It was 7 to 8 years of my life. And it was in the course of that litigation that I met Greg. We dated and then we married.
Kim was a great big picture person. My strength was as tactician. When Kim and I are both in our giftings, we both are, a dangerous combination, and I've really enjoyed working with her.
So he joined me in working that case, and it ended up having a really good resolution for the victims of sexual abuse and that guy who had initially come in the door with the employment law claim.
When we finished that, my main thinking was, we have a business. It's profitable to represent victims in sexual abuse matters unto a conclusion. Prevention's like, wow, somebody needs to do that. In fact, when our own home church says, hey, we could use some instruction here, it's like, well, let us help you find somebody. But as we started looking into the community to find somebody, certainly there's somebody out there that understands this risk and can help our church to be able to leverage resources to prevent it. Sadly, we could find no one. What I didn't know is that God was saying, no, I want you to do it. You two, I've equipped you, background, education, experience, you do it.
We wanted to put together training, policies, screening protocols, resources that would make the church in particular have a better understanding of child sexual abuse, how it might come about, how it's uniquely insidious in a Christ-based environment, how our own values in Christianity can sometimes support an environment where this could happen more easily than elsewhere.
Now is an opportunity, having been immersed in this information, understanding the standards of care, understanding how this risk unfolds, understanding what you do to prevent this risk, now starting to move and work with organizations to be able to leverage that information, not after the train is in the ditch, but to try to keep that train from getting into the ditch.
Ministry Safe really grew out of our desire to take those patterns that we were encountering in our law practice in litigation, and give those resources, give those eyes to see to the Christian church. It is inevitable that at some point, if you haven't already experienced it and you just don't know about it, that this will be an issue that a church will encounter. It's just statistical probability. 90% of kids are sexually abused by someone they know and trust. It is not a stranger. It's somebody who's in their life, in their world. We've got a huge misunderstanding of where the problem might manifest because we're aiming everything at stranger danger. The church has security blankets that they hang on to, and then they think, we're doing this great. We run a background check. We have a matching tag system. We have security protocols in our building. But that's this much of the problem. We got to be willing to address this much of the problem.
Usually we're using the term sexual abusers, and it's a broad brush term that labels anyone who wants to do damage to children. But see, what people don't understand is there's types of sexual abusers. The abduction offender and the preferential offender. So the abduction offender is that person who may have no relationship to the child or the child's family, just simply sees the opportunity, grabs the child, and goes. On the waterfront of child sexual abuse, your abduction offender represents 4% of the problem. The great weight and the majority of the problem, 94% of the problem, is the preferential offender. Now, the preferential offender, who's that? Preferential offender could be male or female, have an age-appropriate adult willing to have sex with him or her, but prefers a child as a sexual partner. So Jerry Sandusky, for example, preferential offender, boys ages 9 to 14. Okay, Larry Nassar, girls ages 9 to 13. Okay, so there's a narrowness to the deviance. And you have to talk about it before you're going to change anything. See, when you talk about it, it gives people the opportunity to make it a priority. Then you can prevent it. But see, not only can you prevent it, it's important to recognize the people that pastor looks out on every Sunday morning have either been sexually abused, are married to someone who's been sexually abused, has a child that's been sexually abused, or has a friend of the heart that's been sexually abused. This is a topic that is going to be received because it's being experienced.
And if there were any other subject matter that was impacting 100% of every congregation in such a prolific manner, it would be addressed repeatedly from the pulpit. And it isn't because of a lot of those misconceptions and because of the idea that we don't want to unnecessarily expose people. Many people societally and in our churches believe false allegations are common, and they're not. They're rare. They're less than 5% of the whole in every study that's come down the pike in the last 35, 40 years. So the foundation of making a difference, having change occur, is let's educate ourselves. Let's understand where and when and how the risk might occur. That means vetting where our kids spend time and asking the right questions. That means showing up. Don't be the drop-off dad or the mom who's always late to pick up. So you're leaving a adult with a child alone because your child's always the last one to be picked up. Understand where your child is spending time. Ask questions. That means in the sleepover context, be very careful about who's going to be in that home. What older siblings are present. What relatives might be visiting. What friends of the older siblings might be present.
And so what we try to do if we have the time and we have the attention, and normally it's a 2 to 3 hour, sometimes a 4-hour training, is helping people understand this in the way in which it actually matters to solve the problem. Do you believe background checks are going to solve your problem alone? Do you believe it's the abduction offender is your problem? Let's get the misconceptions out and talk about the why. Let's talk about the problem. It's the preferential offender. The grooming process is the key. This is the way grooming looks generally. This is the way someone would groom a child in your particular program, or in this particular age, or this teenage girl. So once we understand the information about the risk, now we can build the fence.
What every preferential offender needs is trusted time alone with your kid. And the only way you're going to give trusted time alone with your child is if you believe this individual is trustworthy. Our society does not protect well against the preferential offender, and that is in part because it is much more comfortable for our society and our churches and our child-serving organizations. It's more comfortable for us to think all of the danger is outside the fence. It's very unnerving to think that the danger might be inside the fence. It might be inside our program. It might be inside our volunteer pool or one of our staff members. That's very uncomfortable for people. Preferential offenders have two options. They can either bring the kids to themselves, and they'll do that by having a lot of kid magnet stuff around them that would be attractive to that age and gender preference. Or they go to where kids are gathered. And most churches have little or nothing in place in terms of a preventative protocol that's going to address the risk coming from that type of offender.
I'm not seeing any headlines of child was abducted from children's ministry last week. So what that tells me, as it relates to the abduction offender, the church is killing it. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. You're doing a great job as to 4% of the problem. 94% of the problem, we're wide open. Because as this problem begins to escalate in our culture and our culture becomes more and more angry, the Me Too, at church too, what do? I see most entities just tightening up their barbed wire fence. And it does you no good. And so until people understand what the risk is from the preferential offender, that's the starting place. The next question is, I can't recognize the preferential offender visually. I must understand the preferential offender behaviorally. See, visual profile, Jerry Sandusky wouldn't have tripped your trigger, nor would have Larry Nassar, okay? We have to recognize them by their behaviors, and that's how all the metaphors come together. Type of fence I build is driven by what I want to keep out. And the what I want to keep out are the behaviors of the preferential offender grooming process.